From death comes rebirth. The Arizona Coyotes Hockey Club is in its first season in a new stadium, state, and with new ownership. While the Yotes were a laughingstock in the desert, there is hope that in the mountains of Utah, this franchise could be reborn like a phoenix from the ashes and become a consistently watchable franchise and maybe even a contender. So are the Mormons going to be able to reap the rewards of all those years of frustration in the desert?
I admit it. Last year was rough.
The artists formerly known as the Coyotes actually had a pretty good start to their season last year. They actually ended the calendar year 2023 5 games over 500 and looking like a team whose pluckiness and guile could take them to the playoffs, make their owner's heart grow 3 sizes, and keep them in Arizona for decades to come. Alas, however, this is not the plot of a 90s kids sports movie, and the Coyotes promptly face-planted in January 2024, going on an incomprehensibly bad 14-game losing streak from the end of January through the end of February, only picking up 2 points in those 14 games. With ownership and team executives running out of chances to keep the Coyotes in Arizona, the team actually fought back valiantly in March and April, going over 500 down the backstretch of the season. But unfortunately, it was for naught as the last gasps of a proposal to keep the Coyotes in Arizona failed, and on April 12th, it was official that the Coyotes would be leaving the desert for good and heading to Utah to play in the 24-25 season. It was the end of an era, the failure of an experiment, and proof that ownership is the most important factor in determining a team's long-term success. And if you're a franchise cursed with a bad owner, unfortunately, you're probably never going to have it. Andre Tourigny is following his players to Utah to begin his 4th season as head coach of the Coyotes. Tourigny is a guy who's kind of in a similar boat to Marty St. Louis in Montreal. Very little talent, his team has gotten better over each year, but they have finished at the bottom of the division each of those years. Unlike St. Louis though, Tourigny does have a history of success as a head coach in the junior ranks, but despite the fact that he's had about the same amount of success as St. Louis, despite the fact that he is the coach of the team that had the worst ownership in the NHL, it would be very easy and not completely unjustified for the new owners in Utah to just wipe the slate clean and clear out everybody remaining from that Arizona regime, which would include Tourigny. So I'm putting him in basically the same category that I think St. Louis should be in, which is gotta start producing, gotta be competitive, and at least in the hunt for the playoffs late into the year, especially given the investments new ownership has made into the team this offseason.
You're a star, you're on top. Somebody bring you some hair. You should kill yourself.
While you could definitely make a solid case that Connor Ingram, their young ascending goaltender, is the most important player for Utah this season, Clayton Keller is and has been for the last few years the best player in the formerly Coyotes organization. Just now hitting his prime at 26, he has fully established himself as a point-of-game player for the last 3 years, and a guy capable of potting 30 goals. And the hope is this year he won't have to do it alone, with all those young forwards continuing to grow and develop who can support him, and potentially allowing him to hit that higher echelon of productivity and notoriety that his talent warrants.
Oh, this guy again.
How is he, Doc?
And Keller will be joined on the first line by another former top pick, Barrett Hayton, who suffered 2 massive injuries last year that forced him to miss almost 2/3 of the season. Nick Schmaltz figures to be the other wing on the first line and will serve basically as a placeholder until somebody like Dylan Guenther, Matias Maccelli, or Josh Stone manages to unseat him, which on a normal team would be the first day of training camp. Speaking of Dylan Guenther, he'll be joined on the second line by Arizona Coyotes' next great hope, Logan Cooley, the former 3rd overall pick who put up 44 points in his rookie year and showing both the Canadians and Devils what they passed up on. Rounding out the top 6 is presumed to be Lawson Krause to add a little bit of grit and sandpaper, along with the hope that eventually his offensive production will start to justify giving him a bigger role. That role, by the way, should go to Matias Maccelli, who's currently slated to start the season on the 3rd line despite the fact that he put up 57 points last year. He's a guy who has a lot more offensive pop than Krause and is not terribly defensively, so I could definitely see Maccelli swapping spots with Krause and moving into the top 6 where I think he's a better fit. But for now, he'll be alongside veteran Nick Bukestad, who is now firmly in the mercenary stage of his career, and young prospect Josh Stone, who gave his father and Arizona Coyotes legend Shane Doan some great moments before the franchise his father played for was carved up and shipped off in a Mayflower truck. On the 4th line, you somehow have Alex Kerfoot down there, who's more out of place than pineapple on pizza, along with young grinder Jack McBain and Kevin Stenlund, who I legitimately forgot was a person. Now on defense, that's where things are going to get real spicy. Coyotes have taken to pair their 3 young defensemen, Sean Dursey, Michael Kesselring, and Yusuf Valimaki, with more experienced veterans who have been brought in this offseason. I don't think John Marino or Ian Cole are going to be long-term pieces here in Utah, but Mikhail Sergachev definitely can be. The others will likely be replaced by guys like Simashev and Lemarou in a year's time. And like I mentioned, Connor Ingram is their goaltender and one of the better young goaltenders in the NHL in my opinion, and he had a damn good 23-24 season, nearly cracking the top 20 in goals saved above expected. As for his backup Carl Vajelkimo, well, let's just say we're hoping that Connor Ingram stays healthy and gets to play at least 55 to 60 games this season.
Oh, Britt is in this?
As I said, Utah was busy revamping their defense over the offseason, and the big move was bringing in Mikhail Sergachev from the Lightning. A cap casualty, Utah was able to get him, losing only JJ Moser, who hadn't really developed in Arizona, Connor Geekie, who was going to have a hard time cracking that top 6 with the talent they already have there, and a second-round pick in next year's draft. That's not a terrible deal if you get a guy who's a legit top-pairing defenseman who can quarterback your power play. They also signed John Marino to a decent contract for a guy who's hitting his prime for 6 years with a 4.4 AAV. Marino's not a spectacular defenseman, but he's a very solid, serviceable second-pairing guy. Other than that, the Coyotes dabbled around the fringes, giving guys like Stenlund and Cole short-term deals, and extended Sean Durzi for a pretty hefty sum, but they're really banking on the fact that with a better defensive partner, he'll elevate his game even more and be worth that contract. In the draft, though, Utah made a great selection with their first pick at 6 overall, taking Tija Ginla, son of Calgary Flames legend Jarome Ginla. In my opinion, that was fantastic value for where they got a Ginla, and I think he's got a real chance to become a dynamic playmaker in the NHL sooner rather than later, and make another young forward like a Gunther, like a Michelli, expendable in a trade to upgrade their defense. They also traded back into the first round later in the day, acquiring another forward in Cole Beaudoin.
The Gambletron 2000 says the winner is Cincinnati by 200 points. Why, you worthless hunk of junk?
I really like what Utah did, and I think they have a lot of potential. They're a team that could make a big jump this year, but I don't think they're going to. I think that they're still about a year away from really being in that contender status. I'm still not sold on Torini as their coach, and that defense, while upgraded, is still really full of holes, especially that third pairing. I don't love their power play as well. I think they could really use one more reliable weapon back there to go along with Sergachev, Keller, and Cooley. Maybe that'll be Michelli, maybe that'll be Gunther, Hayden, or Krause stepping up, but without it, I don't see the Utah Coyotes being competitive.
First and foremost, I'm an Islanders fan, but I've always had a soft spot for the Arizona Coyotes, and let me tell you what a wild ride it's been. From last-place finishes to mediocre performance, basically the bottom dwellers of the league, and let me be the first to say, I'll miss the Arizona Coyotes, flaws and all. Howl on, boys.
Sadly, the Coyotes were the most pathetic of all the Arizona sports teams. At least with Suns, Cardinals, and Diamondbacks, they had their eras of resurgence and contention. Diamondbacks actually won a championship at least. But what do the Coyotes have to show in the last 10 years or so? One conference final, out of their ass in 2012, arena troubles that were a clown show, and the drafting of racist bully and Mitchell Miller in the 2020 draft.